I'm really excited to present our next speaker. Her name is Nicky Jackson. She started a website called Range Me, which I'm sure you're familiar with. If you're not, then you should be. It's the new way that brands are really connecting with major retailers. And she came about the idea in a very unique way because she had a product, and I'm going to let her tell the story because I'm going to butcher it. So, Nicky, thank you so much for your time.
Sure, thanks for having me, Joel. So Range more than just a website. We're actually a product discovery platform that is connecting retailers and brands. And the reason why I started Range Me just over 4 years ago is my background's in the CPG space. So I spent many years developing big brands for market, working at Kellogg's and Pepsi. And when you're a big national brand, it's quite easy to get a foot in the door at major retailers. And around 4.5 years ago, I was developing an organic skincare range for kids with eczema. My little girl at the time was 6 months old and had terrible eczema, and I was on maternity leave, bored, decided I wanted to launch a range that was organic and really help heal eczema in a natural way. And what I quickly realized is that it was virtually impossible to get a foot in the door at major retailers when you're not a big brand name. And I started to research the pain points on both the retail and supply side. I was fortunate at the time to have a lot of great retailer relationships for my time at the big companies. And they were basically saying to me, well, Nicky, the whole market has shifted. Yes, we need innovation from the big players, but what consumers are looking for is innovation from brands that speak to them in a way that the big brands can't. But the process of us finding this innovation and dealing with all these incoming suppliers is just completely inundating, resource intensive and inefficient. And so I decided to create a really simple way to help connect these retailers with the right brands based on what they were looking for. And as you can hear from the accent, we started the business in Australia, originally working with all the grocery and drug retailers over there. And about 3 years ago, we moved the business over to the US. And now we work with most of the leading retailers here, from Whole Foods to Target to CVS, Rite Aid, Sephora, Sprouts, really GNC, Petco, all the big names, right through to even smaller mum and pop retailers who are looking for innovative products.
Well, that's actually a great segue into my first question. What comes first typically for somebody launching a product? Is it small businesses picking up your product or major retailers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for a lot of emerging brands that are just starting out, I think it's great for them to start to get traction with smaller retailers. That way they can iron out any kinks in their supply chain and their distribution, get customer feedback, understand the market more so that they are ready for prime time and ready for the big retailers and have all their ducks in a row. When it's ready to go to the big retailers, they can show successful sell-through, they can have a more mature pipeline, sales cycles, supply chain, and really be ready for what's to come next. It's also important that not only do they get customer feedback from working with smaller retailers, but they also develop financial stability, because when it comes to supplying the big retailers, the volumes are significantly more and the business needs to be more developed and more mature in order to supply.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't understand that kind of going in, but what do you see as kind of the biggest hurdle that one of those small businesses has to jump when going from the independent retail success into a major retailer?
Yeah, I think it's really about, a lot of the time, it's really about how to deal with these bigger retailers, and setting up trading terms. They're going to want you to commit a certain amount of money to promotional spend, and setting up trading terms is quite a complex beast for smaller suppliers that haven't necessarily done it before. And if you set up the wrong terms and you're squeezed on margin and squeezed on cost, you're going to go out of business very quickly.
Right.
And so a lot of these small brands need to really understand what is the average margin in my category for a bigger retailer, what kind of promotional spend should I be supporting my brand with, what is reasonable and what is not. I do think a lot of big retailers, they're not going to squeeze them to the point of them going out of business, because then no one wins. But I think a small brand really needs to understand what the benchmarks are and what they should be going out there with, so that they can actually sustainably sell their product in that retailer, and that it's a win for both sides, because of course both need to be successful in market.
That's a great point, and we see that as well. But how can a smaller business really prepare for a major retailer picking up their line? Let's say they contact them through your platform. How can they prepare for that kind of conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we have thousands of brands every week that are getting contacted by major retailers through the platform. And a lot of these brands are 0 to 1, 0 to 5 million revenue, so they really are getting started. And I think for a lot of the brands, it's about when you have that conversation with the retailer, you need to really understand who the retailer is, where are they located, where are their distribution centers, what type of retailer are there, what is this buyer's purchasing strategy, what is their focus, so that when you're talking to this buyer, you're having a meaningful conversation, and the buyer really appreciates it. You've done your homework, you know who they are. I can't tell you how many times I've heard of situations where major retailers on our platform are reaching out to suppliers, and the suppliers are like, I'm sorry, like Rite Aid, CVS, just tell me like more about you. And I'm just like, you have to do your research. You have to understand these are big players. They have a lot of stores all over the United States. You need to understand where their DCs are. You need to do your research before you speak to them. And for a lot of them, these buyers, they're used to being hounded by suppliers. They're used to suppliers dying to get into those stores and dying to get to them. So when they're reaching out and they want to know more about your product, you have to give them the courtesy and show that you understand, who they are and how they operate. I think a lot of it comes to doing your research before, speaking to emerging brands that you know of or can connect to, that you know are selling in there. Buy them a coffee, take them out for lunch, try and get as much knowledge as you can about what it means to supply that retailer. You really have to understand, how does your product solve an issue for the buyer? How's it going to fit into their assortment? What could it potentially replace? Why is it going to be successful in that particular retail? What's in it for that particular buyer? And also, not only what are you going to do to get the product in there, but how are you going to support that product once it's in there? It's one thing to get your product onto the shelf, but how are you going to get your product off the shelf? What kind of marketing? What kind of promotional support? If it's in a grocery store, you're going to be doing demos, taste testing, sampling, coupons. How are you going to actually drive those sales?
Right.
We hear time and time again from retailers saying that the biggest challenge for a lot of these emerging brands is not necessarily getting on shelf, it's how to get the cut through once they're on shelf into the consumer's hands. And I think that's the biggest challenge, that these brands need to think about how they're going to support those brands. And then the third thing is really about supply chain. So when you're talking to these big retailers, understand how they like, where their distribution centers are, how they like to receive stock, what their payment terms are. Just so you understand what you're getting yourself into. You don't want to have these conversations if you are going to let them down on the second conversation. So you really need to understand all the logistics behind the supply chain and actually fulfilling your promise to this particular retailer.
That's a fantastic point. Do you have any tips on how they can come about that information?
Well, through our platform, we do give suppliers a lot of information, how to, in our support center, how to best prepare for your first meeting.
Excellent.
What questions you're typically going to be asked, a little bit of information about pricing, trading terms. I think there is a lot of information in there. The other thing I would also recommend is, there's a lot of consultants out there that are also, their job is to help emerging brands understand it, be successful. And a lot of these consultants specialize in certain retailers. So while it may seem like a lot of money up front, it probably could save them a lot in the long run, because of the way that they'll learn about how to best approach these retailers and how to get the most for when you're supplying them in terms of trading terms, etc., to make sure that you actually don't go out of business a month after you're on shelf. And then the other thing I would also recommend is, again, as I said, go to their stores, see what's on their shelves. I'm guaranteed they've got other emerging brands on their shelves. Try connect with those founders. Try take them for a coffee, buy them something, just bribe them to talk to you, because I know that even in my world, I'm always happy to help other people that are in a similar situation to what I was a few years ago, trying to start out building a tech company. I feel like it's really great karma to try and help other people, and I think that in our industry, people also like to help others.
Yep.
So definitely recommend that. Trying to connect with like-minded brands that are in a similar situation and learn from each other.
That's fantastic. I think the one thing that really sets a successful entrepreneur apart is the ability to pick up the phone. So I'm glad that you you said that.
They say it's a little bit of grit and a little bit of hustle, and you have to have both in order to get anywhere.
That's great. One of our members asked a really poignant question. He said, I didn't go to business school and I don't know much about payment terms and contracts. How can I protect myself besides having a lawyer review the agreements? It seems like everybody wants so much money up front.
Yeah, I think the best thing, it comes back to that, that researching consultants or people that are specializing in supplying certain retailers. I think that could definitely help, and maybe the best money you could spend just to understand how they work and what the pitfalls are and what the holes and the gaps you should be aware about are. Because yes, a lawyer can read it from a contractual perspective, but what's commercially viable. It's also really great to understand what are the averages for that category, for that retailer. What are the average margins that they'd expect? What type of promo dollars are they getting from other suppliers? And I think the other thing is to be frank with the buyer. So buyers prefer you to be honest. So understand what your thresholds are. Where could you reasonably get to, which won't kind of put you out of business or make you feel comfortable? Because at the end of the day, the buyer wants to see you be successful. For a lot of these emerging brands, I hear a lot about these amazing partnerships that the retailers develop with these brands to really help them be successful, get on the map, help them build their whole company. And you can foster a really great, it's all about relationship building. If you can foster a really great relationship with this buyer, don't be a pest, build a relationship, be someone that they want to be around, someone that they want to help, and really have an open, honest, frank conversation so you know where you stand, and try and have as much knowledge as you can, so you're going in there with that knowledge and that understanding, and you're actually showing to the buyer that you've done your research. There's nothing worse than someone going in there and just acting as if, and just being open and frank, but having not done the research and no understanding. Yes, you can get a lawyer, but you have to really understand their language, their terms, and be able to have that frank conversation. I think that's really important. And I think that, trading terms are critical, and it could actually make or break your business.
Yeah.
And so do the research, have those conversations, and importantly, build that relationship with that buyer, understand your threshold, and make sure that you stick to that, because you don't want to go out of business and you don't want to not be able to supply them either.
Right. I think that's a great point, because often, a question that we often get is, how do I get in touch with the retail buyer, before I formally present the product, so that I can learn what they want to see in my brand?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think that a lot of that is actually saved for the big brands that have existing relationships. There you have the luxury of going in and saying, look, we're developing our pipeline for 2019. We're thinking about doing these extensions or this new innovation. What do you think? Let's co-create. And I think buyers love that, because they get to be part entrepreneurial and get to co-create with these big brands. That's a luxury that not many people have, because retailers and buyers are getting inundated by suppliers contacting them. They have existing vendors. They have a whole other job that they have to do, let alone just speaking to new vendors. And so you're not going to get the time of day, unfortunately, with a retailer to say, hey, I've got this great idea, this is what I'm thinking, give me your feedback. They're not going to be interested. What they will do, however, is if they see promise in what you have, they see, oh wow, this product's on trend, it's got something unique, it's got a unique ingredient, it's got a promise, there's something I really like about it, I love the brand story, but hey, the pricing or the packaging is just not working for me. They will reach out, and we've seen it time and time in the platform, where they'll reach out, they'll connect, and they will actually work with the brands to get it where it needs to be for that particular retailer. So it will help you change the packaging. In the instance of Whole Foods, I've heard many examples where they will help you change out the ingredients to make them clean and permissible to be in Whole Foods. And so a lot of it is like you have to have that initial pool of what you have on offer, and they will work with you to tweak it. Sephora, lots of examples where they've helped brands repackage, rebrand their whole business and be successful, because these buyers know what their consumers and their shoppers are looking for. So I think it's about getting that foot in the door with what you have. It has to be compelling. It can't be a me too. It has to be giving the buyer something that they want. And then often buyers with emerging brands, they love to co-create and love to work with them. But you need that initial foot in the door.
Okay, I agree, and that's a tough foot to put in there. But
It is.
one of the things that we get asked a lot is, how do I, what comes first, the distributor or the grocery store? Especially when going to those regional grocery chains. A lot of times when you speak to the buyer, they say you have to have the distributor, and when you speak to the distributor, they say you have to have the grocery store first.
Call it chicken and egg.
Yep.
And it does differ depending on the retailer. So we have some retailers in our platform, Hy-Vee, for example, a really strong regional chain who love sourcing within the platform and work directly with the brands. So those go direct to store. A lot of the time they bypass the distributor. And at the end of the day, the brand makes more money and the retailer makes more money, and everyone's happy if it works. The value of a distributor for other retailers, and even Hy-Vee do use distributors, is that those brands that are carried by that distributor, that distributor's already set up in their system. They don't have to go through that whole process. They know that whole supply chain, that whole maze has already been figured out, and they're not going to have as many teething issues. So within our platform, we actually enable the suppliers list what distributors they use, and then the buyers can search by distributor. So if you're a particular retailer and you only source through Unify or KP, you can actually filter in the platform and find those products that are carried in those particular retailers, in those particular distributors. So it makes it easier for them to know, and then they can onboard them in a much easier way. So I think it really does depend, and also depends on how much infrastructure and setup you have as a small brand. Do you have the know-how of how to get the product from A to Z? Do you have the right supply chain, the right distribution channels? Do you have all that set up? Distributors also help with retailer relationships. So if you have all that set up, then fine, you can maybe go it alone and try that, and maybe it'll help you. But I feel like if you don't have that, the distributor is a very worthwhile partner, because they can help accelerate your business considerably. But for some retailers, they won't necessarily take you on until you're with the distributor. And the distributor often won't take you on until you're in a retailer. So it kind of goes back to also the getting into those smaller retailers, because that helps drive your business. You can go direct to those smaller retailers. You can show that you have some form of distribution, you have proven success, and then maybe within Range Me, a big retailer reaches out, and you can go to the distributor and say, hey, we've got this big retailer interested in carrying our products. We know you work with them, and then you can start that conversation.
That's an excellent point. I think it is the chicken or the egg situation, as you said. But one of our members asked a really good question, and this is something I'm sure you get all the time. 'Cause you work with Target. How does a major retailer, how do you work with them if you can't get anybody on the phone?
Yeah, well, it's impossible to get a buyer.
Impossible.
Let's be honest. They're very busy people. They have a lot in their job to worry about with their existing assortment, their existing customers, and reaching their own budgets and reaching their own milestones, let alone worrying about new vendors. So they're not there to answer the phone and just have these half-an-hour conversations with the brand who thinks that their product is the best thing since sliced bread, because everyone has an amazing product.
Right.
Everyone thinks their baby's beautiful. No one thinks their baby's ugly. But and they're impossible to get a hold of. And actually, Target was our first retailer client when we launched here in the United States, because they wanted to find innovation from emerging brands. They were wanting to find new innovation, but the process, just all the new submissions are going into what we call the black hole, because buyers don't have the time to get in touch. And actually, when if you go to trade shows and you see buyers walking around, they actually twist their lanyards around so you can't see that they're a particular buyer from a particular retailer, because then they get inundated. And in fact, buyers with all the retailers we work with now walk around trade show cards with the Range Me, the way that suppliers can sign up to Range Me, and that's the cards that they give out instead of their business cards, because if they gave out their business cards, they wouldn't be able to get back to these hundreds of suppliers. So
right. I think that's a really good point, because it's impossible to get these busy buyers on the phone. But can you tell me a little bit about what other major mistakes do companies make when kind of bringing their product to a major retailer, besides expecting their calls to be answered or their emails to be returned?
Yeah, I think you can't ever stop a brand from trying every which way, every which channel to get in touch with the buyer. Mm-hmm. So that's always going to happen. But there is a point where the buyer will just start to get annoyed. And if there's something of interest, they would obviously reach out. And that's why they're funneling all their innovation or all their inquiries through the platform, because the platform of Range Me shows them the products in the most beautiful format. It's got everything that the buyer needs to see. Right. Where you're stocked, indicative pricing, beautiful images, your brand story, videos. It really does bring it to life. And I promise you now, if it's something of interest to them, they will reach out, they will connect, because I see that time and time again. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, what was the question again?
So I was asking, what are the biggest mistakes that companies make when submitting a product?
Yeah, so definitely the platform is a great way for them to submit. The other biggest mistake is, once you do get that interest, once you do get that introduction, the biggest mistake is not actually knowing, as I said before in the interview, not knowing enough about who the retailer is, who the buyer is, what their strategic objectives are, what it means to supply them, just not having that knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I also hear time and time again, which astounds me, of retailers reaching out to brands and then brands not following up and getting back to them, which is hilarious, makes me so angry, but it happens. Particularly after trade shows or beauty periods where brands are just inundated. I would also say that for brands that want to actually get that face-to-face and that direct contact with buyers, I can't express enough how important it is to have an active Range Me profile, which has got all your information and is beautiful and working for you 24/7. Mm-hmm. But then also eCRM, which is our parent company. Yep. eCRM actually does the same thing as Range Me, but does it in a physical sense. Mm-hmm. But if you go to their sessions, you're guaranteed that you're going to be sitting in front of the decision maker and having those face-to-face meetings. Yep. Third thing you can do is go to a trade show. So if there's a trade show in your area, in your sweet spot, of course that's another way to hope that a buyer walks around. But the problem with that is they are very expensive and there's no guarantee that a buyer is going to stop at your booth.
Right.
So those are kind of the best ways to get in touch. And I think the biggest mistake that brand makes once they do have that connection is not doing their research and not knowing how to best present your product to that retailer. Showing them how it's the gap in their assortment, what the benefits will be, what the incremental growth they would receive through carrying your product, understanding the market with data, Nielsen data or SPINS data, understanding where your product sits vis-a-vis the competition, understand how your category is growing, how they're performing or not performing versus the competition. That will all show the buyer that you really understand what the market and you understand why your product will really apply in their retailer. They want to see that you've done the research and they want to see that you know what you're talking about. And actually within our platform, we stream in for the retailer's live scan data. So they can actually understand a lot about performance of products, promoted prices, not promoted prices. They have a lot of that information at their fingertips, but when the brands bring it in and display that level of understanding, that you're talking their language now. And that's really important.
I think it's a phenomenal example that not a lot of people really understand, is knowing that landscape is what the buyers want from you, because if you know that, then you're going to be able to adapt with the times ahead of the curve, being able to foresee. But before you get to that point, a lot of products have the trouble of being able to stand out from the crowd. If there are similar products around, and let's say theirs is exceptional, but how do you stand out? How do you peacock?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best thing is you have to have a point of difference. There's no point being another tea, another tea on the market. Are you a granule? Do you dissolve and absorb quicker? Do you have a special core ingredient which is going to help with healing? Do you have awesome packaging that's going to stand out on shelf and just pop and make a customer want to purchase you? So I think standing out is really about what is your proposition that is unique and differentiated. You can't just be another flavor. It really has to be something special that's going to pop. I think packaging is such an important way to stand out once you're on shelf from your competition, and it is one of the most important attributes that buyers look for. And actually within the platform, it's like online shopping for the buyers. They literally, the first thing they see is your packaging. They're consumers too. Your packaging and your branding is spot on. They will immediately be drawn to your product. And then I think, of course, the best things to make your brand pop and stand out is once you're on shelf, I think, consider your placement and also pricing to help drive that trial and conversion at shelf.
That's great advice, and that actually leads me into my next question. What metrics, can I use to show that my product is growing and I'm developing that following?
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely giving them sales data, so showing them trending sales data. If you can get repeat purchase data, so that's a really key metric to show that consumers not only purchasing once, but they're coming back for more. That shows loyalty and loyalty behavior. I think there's huge value in purchasing, as I said, industry data to understand your market, your competitors, vis-a-vis how you're performing. If you have a really strong story with that, there's no way they won't take you into their store if you have a really strong, compelling story about how much you're driving incremental growth in a competitor of theirs, how you're driving repeat purchase and loyalty. I think that's really key. And really, the other thing is social media following is something that they really do focus on, which surprised me when I first started Range.me, but actually now in the product profiles, we clearly have at the front how many followers these brands have on social, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. And it really is something that the retailers look for. Yes. And it's a lot of times how they discover and are attracted to brands. So what is your social media campaign? How are you communicating with your audience? And how are you continuing to develop that groundswell? And we know that today brands are developed overnight. They launch on social media and they develop a huge following. And how can you make sure and convince that retailer that you're continually doing that?
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal insight, because I've seen that they do look at that as well. That's really how they can tell what the world is talking about is through that social media platform. So
Absolutely. I just heard of a recent success story with Sephora where they discovered a product through Instagram. It was a serum selling at $5 or a really low price point, only online, and that's how they connected to the brand. They also saw them in the platform, and I think now they distribute it nationally. So There really are those success stories where, social media following is really important.
That's excellent. I think you've given them a lot of really good advice, but if you could leave our audience with the best thing that they can do today to prepare for success this year, what would you tell them to focus on?
I think really it's about making sure that you have really being honest with yourself, making sure you have the right offering, something which is differentiated, something which is going to pique a buyer's interest, something which you're going to be able to convince a buyer that it is something which is going to drive incremental volume, incremental success in their stores. And I think you really need to to focus on driving and pulling out those benefits. I think relationship building is super important. So when you do have that connection, when you do have that interest, building a strong relationship with your point of contact, being someone that they want to trust, they want to partner with, and they want to be around is absolutely key. Master the art of that. Go to a course, practice it, but really it's about making sure you have that personal connection and build that strong relationship. And then of course, back everything up by data. Make sure that you're constantly monitoring the way your business is going, is tracking. Be honest with yourself. Look at your purchase rate. Look at your repeat purchase rate. And also, the most important thing is to set goals. I was recently at Fancy Foods in San Francisco, and I met with a supplier that I met her and her husband about 2 years ago. They're a husband and wife team. Absolutely adore them, and she's like, our goal is to get into this many more doors in 2018. I think it was 400 more doors, and it's just almost the end of January, we almost reached 100. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, have that goal. And then her goal after that is to then get some external funding to help continue to grow her business. And so really it's about setting those goals, being honest with yourself, and setting those milestones so that you can always benchmark yourself and know that you're continually growing.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that example. And thank you for your time and expertise. I really appreciate you sharing that with everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Joel.